today we have Lockheed Martin Vice President and Chief Executive William Blair. I recently, Chief of Air Staff, he spoke about Indian Air Force needs about more than 500 fighter jets against the depleting squadron we have, which is a 30, and it is dangerously low to combat our two fronts war. So he puts the aerospace and aircraft, fighter aircraft, especially the center of Indian Armed Forces, basically. And also, recently, India is going through transformation. India is the very threshold of aerospace revolution, what we call and define it, in terms. The scale of technology and numbers are definite for making India an aerospace hub, which you also agree, William. So I'm doing a series on behalf of Businessworld and BW Defense, a series where we're talking with leading aerospace giants of the world who have set up, their innovations, their scales, their equipment and factories worldwide. And Lockheed Martin is one of the biggest aerospace company in the world. So thank you having with us, William, on Businessworld. Let me start by asking you, what is the Lockheed Martin commitment to India now looking forward? Could you give us the broad overview of Lockheed Martin commitment in India? Say beginning post-COVID is a different scenario worldwide, right. Especially India also is hard economically. So putting all that perspective, how do you see Lockheed Martin vision and commitment to India?
Well, I just have to say we see tremendous opportunities in India, and I have to start with our history, our foundation that sets that trajectory for us. We've been in India for over 3 decades, as you know. India is an incredibly important market for India. That's why I came back, frankly, into this role. I have several significant experiences previously in India. And India is a cornerstone of our strategy, and it really rests on building and nurturing partnerships within the Indian industry. And where we share technology, we create capabilities, and we co-produce, co-develop for India and from India, and frankly for the globe when you see how much we're doing and how it ties into our global supply chain. So we continue to build on this 3 decades of partnerships, and I think the most important thing is the growth of the indigenous defense manufacturing ecosystem. We've been at the center of that with our joint ventures over the last decade. We came to India in terms of setting up joint ventures over a decade now ago, and it was out of opportunity. We saw opportunities, not out of obligation. We had to meet offsets. Of course, offsets are there as part of the defense procurement procedure and now the DAP 2020 going forward. But we saw a tremendously positive business case for building and growing operations here in India, and it's been tremendously successful. So then you ask about the future. That sets the foundation for our future. The joint ventures that we have are 2 with Tata Advanced Systems Limited. One is Tata Lockheed Martin Aerostructures Limited. The second is Tata Sikorsky Aerospace Limited. These started actually in the case of Kilamal, as we call it, building center wing boxes and empennages, the tail of the aircraft for the C-130Js. Now we've delivered over 130 empennages. We actually have achieved over 85% indigenization. And then with Sikorsky, that started out, building actually very high-end aerospace components. I know it, from my aviation and mechanical engineer and aircraft engines where I started. And when I saw what was being implemented a decade ago, that really set a new standard for India. And it wasn't just for the joint venture. It closed down to over 240 suppliers, most of them MSMEs and startups. And so I think, why do I start there? That's the frame of reference. That's the foundation for Lockheed Martin in India. And so when we sell our headquarters on, opportunities going forward for the fighter and for the helicopter requirements, we know that requires, us to lean forward and actually, implement in advance of the requirement. And that's what we've done consistently.
William, I put this again perspective for my viewer about your background, what we call, you have very unique experience, as senior leaders from Lockheed Martin. You also have worked with, leading aerospace giants, say Raytheon, and GE Aviation, any India basically. So you understand the Indian ecosystem very well. You understand the India ecosystem, especially defense ecosystem, is taking transformation, day by day. How do you see such transformation, taking place? Is it significant now, which your previous experience, when you look back, how it is going for a change for good?
Yeah, no, it's tremendous. My first introduction to India was in the energy sector, marine and industrial gas turbine engines, way back in 1996. But most significantly, I came back 2005 to 2008, and I was working with suppliers at that time that were, had become, large and very successful MSMEs supporting the automotive sector with a vision to get into defense. Now I'm meeting those same companies, and they are doing incredible business. Many of them suppliers to Lockheed Martin and our global supply chain. When I came back in 2010, it was just, the formative phase of the joint ventures that I just mentioned. Now, you see what's being produced, not just in the base of the joint venture, but we've invested in, building composite structures, designing and building composite structures, metal-to-metal bonding, sheet metal, pushing the envelope, if you will, in terms of technologies and from a metal forming perspective, and creating capabilities that didn't exist previously in India. On the Sikorsky joint venture with Tata, they're building the most advanced aircraft engine components, rotating parts and structural components that I, designed as an engineer. And so I'm really proud to see that progress. So you take what is just a small beginning as a joint venture, and you can see how it can cascade and actually multiply into meeting multiple capabilities. And so, we started, I would say somewhat humble beginnings with some of these initiatives. And you can see how these companies have really blossomed. And so I mentioned 240 suppliers feed into the joint venture. When we look at offset fulfillment, we may work through a large Indian company, but that company cascades down to tier 2, tier 3 suppliers that probably weren't there 10, 15 years ago. And so I think, one, the business case is very strong. Two, the foundation and capability is there. And as a country, we're competing with other countries, in the region. And I think India is so much more advanced in terms of both capability, quality, delivery, reliability, and of course, cost efficiency that we can deliver. And so it's a very robust ecosystem today. I would say orders of magnitude ahead of where we were 15 years ago when I came back to India, for a significant period of time. And so then that future is incredible. Now with the industrial security annex signed last year at the 2+2 dialogue, and this year now with the BECA signed, I think that creates opportunities for us as companies to actually, move up the value chain, as we call it, in the way we engage partners and suppliers in India, and not just components. It's much more than components. It's major assemblies. It's very high tech, and it's helping those companies actually move up the curve and take on much greater work. And I think it's leading to the design and development aspect that we've all aspired to. It's not just production.
William, of course, before coming to the arms and munitions, you raised such a fundamental, aspect of building capability within India. I just, before I come back to the specifics of Lockheed Martin, I'll take your opinion. You are a MIT graduate. A lot of Indian bright young students, they want to study the coveted MIT, what we call the best of the best. You have done your mechanical engineer, I understand from your portfolio. Then again, we come back to our ecosystem you talk about. Defense is all about building innovation, capability, and producing those young talent to do that. But we have not been able to adapt. We have to do much more. Where we are lacking, in terms of building advanced capability as far as India is concerned. What is your advice for, how do you look at Indian academia, industry interaction as far as defense innovation is concerned? Your take would be very important to understand based on experience, your study with academia, and of course, as the leader from global Lockheed Martin, aerospace giant. Please tell us.
My experience, when I actually went to MIT, I was working full time actually. And I think I'll call it on-the-job experience, on-the-job training. Some people call it OJT. I think is the most effective way to accelerate learning and do it while you're working. And so we have an internship program at our joint venture down in Hyderabad where we bring in young women from remote villages, and we give them an opportunity, a job, mentoring, skills training, skills development in aerospace and defense. And it's been tremendously effective. We've had many graduates move up through the leadership ranks through that program, supervising others, men and women in that operation. I think it's just a great example. That's a small example, though. I think scaling that up and finding a way to connect with universities through internships, apprenticeship programs. For me, I had a summer job that gave me the experience that said I wanted to be an aircraft engine design engineer for the rest of my life, and have the opportunity to go to a university like MIT. And so it was a great program. I think those programs exist, or we can make those programs viable, very much so in India. Connecting in with the universities, of course, the IITs, the IIMs, but there's so many universities that could be a part of connecting into that aerospace and defense ecosystem. It's a very strong model that I grew up with in the U.S. And it can be at many different levels. It can be apprenticeship at the example I said, coming in at the entry level in an aerospace and defense production environment. It can be apprenticeships into management. We've trained over 1,500 people in aerospace and defense over the last decade through our joint venture. And they've moved on to go, I'm sure, be leaders in their own rights in other companies. It's important that we accelerate that, I think. And I think we do that through companies, public-private partnership, universities, apprenticeship, internship programs. We would be happy to, we've already been a part of that, but I think, taking that to the next level and really seeing how that can accelerate the development of talent and how that infuses into the aerospace and defense ecosystem. Because we're moving to the next level. We're moving into the level of, original design and development in India to meet India's requirements and position for exports. And I think now more than ever, there needs to be greater focus on that and collaborate with other ministries, Ministry of Education, Ministry of Commerce, bring more players on board. There's a great collaboration at the state level. Telangana State actually has a lot of initiatives that we've been able to tap into. So I think it's a combination. I think it's national, state level, universities, companies working together.
William, very well explained. Of course, it would be much valuable insights, of course, for Indian policymakers to understand and lean into that. But now back to Lockheed Martin. There's no doubt about that. When we talk about Lockheed Martin, we talk about, especially in the aerospace, we talk about one of the best and most advanced platform. Like F35 and F22, which is the best in the class, and operational only 5th generation fighter aircraft, as far as the fact is concerned, of course. Now you talked about 2+2, with India and the United States, and with the signing of BECA, whatever the restriction we had, the binding restriction we had has been taken off, because as far as the operation is concerned. Now, does that open a door for India to get more advanced platforms, cooperation, collaboration with Lockheed Martin? Say, for example, hypothetically, if I'm talking about Lockheed Martin has a very close cooperation with US allies in, say, South Korea, Japan, Israel, where they supply the top advanced aircraft, say F-35 for the matter. Now, is it open to India now? Can it say something like F-35 platform, apart from F-21? How do you look at such opening BECA now?
Yeah, I think there's a couple questions there. I'll answer them both. One, we're really excited about the kind of the evolution of the government-to-government agreements over the last decade. So not just foreign militaries, and not just companies like Lockheed Martin, really accelerating the aerospace and defense ecosystem, but also having the foundational agreements, government-to-government, that support that allow us transfer of technology, that allows us to work with companies under the Industrial Security Annex that was signed last year and exchange classified information, which frankly is is needed for us to move up the value chain, as I said earlier. So now with the BECA signed, and you look at the full holistic view of those agreements, we as industry are more able, with the support of the U.S. government and these agreements with India, to bring our best capabilities, to deliver our best capabilities, and capabilities on the platform that are there. We have capabilities on the C-130J now already, that with the signing of these joint agreements, we can enable capabilities that weren't really there, right? And so there's a technology we're bringing on the F-21 in terms of 4th generation, 5th generation technologies insertion. It's automatic ground collision avoidance system. It's incredibly effective, actually. It saves pilots, it saves aircraft, it allows them to execute their missions more effectively. Now with the BECA agreement signed, you can use these, employ these full capabilities. And some of those capabilities exist even on the C-130Js in operation with the Indian Air Force. And so I think that's a dimension that allows, when we offer the F-21 to meet the MRFA and exceed the MRFA requirements, frankly, it can be, the best solution because it has the capabilities. The other thing that's important when we think about a platform, it's not just the platform, it's the systems on the platforms, right? It's the tier 1 companies like GE on the engine side and the avionics and the radar and the missile systems. To use them at their maximum capabilities, it really depends on having these foundational agreements in place. That's what's really being mobilized. So we have, our most advanced actively scanned array radar, electronically scanned array radar on the F-21. And it's derived from both the F-22 and the F-35. And it has detection ranges nearly double that of the legacy versions. And that enables the missile systems on that platform, to operate more effectively, obviously beyond visual range. We have the most advanced cockpit with a large area display that's really leveraging hardware and software from our 5th generation fighters. And so with these foundational agreements, working together with the U.S. government through the licensing and release process, it really removes, I'll call it friction in the system, or it enables a connection that maybe we weren't able to fully leverage, from a U.S.-India perspective. I mentioned the ground collision avoidance system. That auto GCAS, as we call it, has saved over 10 pilot lives and 10 aircraft, more than 10 aircraft. But and so it essentially detects when a pilot might be disoriented or losing control, and automatically takes control of the aircraft. Mm-hmm. And so it's really incredibly important. Why is that important? Yes, it saves lives, it saves aircraft. It allows the pilot to push the envelope, push to the limits of the capability of the aircraft and himself or herself as a pilot, and know that they've got a system in place that can take over when needed. So I just think that offers a lot of opportunities. The F-21 that we're offering is a very advanced aircraft. It's part of a $165 billion market in terms of aircraft ecosystem that it taps into. It would translate to incredibly, a lot of value under the self-reliant India Atmanirbhar Bharat mission to really meet both India's requirements and export potential as well. And that can be said on the helicopter front. The MH Romeos will be inducted next year into the Indian Navy, delivering incredibly important and critical capability from an anti-submarine warfare and anti-surface capability with that most advanced helicopter platform. And it actually fits because it also happens to be the same platform in operation with the other Quad members. So you start to think about the naval cooperation. And so why am I talking about that? Because under these foundational agreements, now you have bilateral agreements that match up with other countries that have similar agreements, that we can now collaborate together as navies, and we as companies can deliver our best capabilities. Last dimension, though, I think that this opens up for us is space cooperation. The space cooperation potential is huge. We already work together between ISRO and NASA, but now as we start to think about the defense and the government applications, the capabilities that the space domain can bring in terms of geospatial and space domain awareness, that cooperation, I think, opens up opportunities for us as Lockheed Martin, and it offers us opportunities to bring our best capability to the services. Space domain gives you an integrating capability across multiple domains. air, land, and sea. And so I think that's tremendously important. I believe now with ABECA being signed, but other agreements preceding that, the COMCASA, there's a lot of things that we can lean into now, knowing that we've got the foundation set between our two governments.
Right, William. You pointed some of the very key collaboration, which is it's about Lockheed Martin space program, which we again going to talk about in detail. But I want to come back again on F-21. It is the most ambitious. It's a part of the most ambitious aerospace project ever India will take. It's 18 billion of scale. And it's not about the money. It's also about setting up the whole system in India. And then possibly in the future be the hub and export that. But before I would like some more clarification from you. Basically, F-21 we'll talk about. You said, of course, it's designed for India. And it's when LM puts it for 114 fighter jet specific to F-21. But it is well reported that F-21 is built upon F-16 and add much more though in terms of avionics, electronic warfare suite, and say weapon and radars. But it is not up in the sky yet, right? And when selected, it will be there when selected for MMRC2 program, basically. I mean, reference will be always towards F-16 as a proven platform. Whenever we talk about F-21, how do you look at such things, such ambiguity?
Well, I think the success of Lockheed Martin and in terms of the evolution of our aircraft development, it's building on the foundation of incredibly efficient platforms, right? So F-21 is a perfect example of that. I mentioned it taps into a $165 billion fighter aircraft ecosystem. That's not by chance. It's the most exported aircraft in terms of look at the nations, and many of them partner nations with India or having strong relationships with India. So there's a great collaboration that comes from that. But it's really important to understand. I mean, India wants to accelerate their MRFA program, and you want to deliver capability reliably and the most capability as quickly as possible. And I think the F-21 allows that to happen. It basically meets and delivers very unique capabilities specific to the Indian Air Force that we infuse into that platform. And so the F-21 is built on a very strong foundation, very proven technically, no question in terms of its capability to deliver as a single engine fighter. And that's also important to emphasize. A single engine fighter with a single pilot translates to tremendously greater leverage for the Indian Air Force in terms of life cycle cost, but even manpower. The men and women that will be flying the F-21, are a unique breed of individual, right? And equally important to the number of aircraft that the Indian Air Force needs, they need pilots to fly it. And so the fact that it's such an advanced single engine fighter and single pilot, it gives it a tremendous amount of leverage. So if you look at what that platform can carry, much more than, compared to even the F-16 in terms of missiles and systems, it far exceeds. And on a per aircraft basis, it gives tremendous advantage to the Indian Air Force. And so I think it's almost unmatched in terms of capability that it can deliver, the power of the punch, if you will, with a single engine, single pilot aircraft. The life cycle cost it can deliver can't be understated, because that gives the Indian Air Force the ability to have more flexibility, within fixed budgets, and we all are facing huge budget constraints going forward. So it's technology, but it's also capability, and it's capability for price over the life cycle. And it's actually, frankly, it has not just the advanced technologies, but it has kind of the Make in India component already built into it. When we started the joint venture building C-130J tails and center wing boxes, it was long before the delivery of the first C-130J to India, and now there's 12 operating with the Indian Air Force. Today, we're building, starting the initial development to build the fighter wings in Hyderabad, long before we even have a formal requirement for the MRFA. So that's the other component. You'd like to know that you're already building product
right.
in high-end systems in India before you induct those aircraft. And I'm happy to say we did it on the C-130J, and we'll do it again well in advance of the F-21.
William, you said F-21 is a strong foundation of F-16, which is very proven and has a very proven track record around the world, and the buyers, around the world basically. But the same MRFA, our multi-role fighter program, is also evolving, and their competition is heating up. For example, Boeing is now proposing, their upgrade version of F-15 called FEX, which they talk about much more, new suite and avionics, much greater weapon integration, basically a different platform for India on higher scale. And another competitor, Rafale, is already in India. The government has bought 36 Rafale, which they say very specific India enhancement is there. And of course, Rafale is coming. They're proposing more to Indian government, and adding that if they buy, they will also help building India aero engine with their collaboration with Safran. Basically, because such proposal is coming up, is hitting up basically in the whole competition. Then how do you differentiate, F-21, especially Lockheed Martin, as one of the top contender, and as you have some of the advanced platforms, especially heritage of building fighter jets, basically in terms of competition, here in India.
Well, I think the F-21 is a team approach. You mentioned there are other fighters in the mix. For the MRFA requirement, it's important to understand it's a pretty broad requirement, the MRFA, since it's a mix of twin engine and single engine aircraft. It's a pretty significant span in terms of capabilities. But when you look at the F-21, I just mentioned being a single engine fighter, a single pilot fighter, with a maximum capability in terms of both radar and missile systems, it's a team effort, and it also includes the engine, and so the GE engine. It's a unique fit. Think about the fleet, the Indian Air Force fleet. They have many fighters up on the top end, twin engine, very large fighters, a long history with what they have in service. And yes, as you said, they've inducted the Dassault Rafale twin engine aircraft. On the lower end, you have the light combat aircraft, right? And it's actually proven to be, it's really evolved over the last decade. And I've seen reports that would likely induct more, and even consider a twin engine version for a naval variant. And so where the F-21 fits in very neatly in between those two segments of the aircraft, if you will, the large twin engine pilot aircraft and the smaller single engine, single pilot aircraft, the LCA. So the F-21 actually brings, as I said earlier, a very strong capability that fits in between those two levels of capability. And so I think that's the way you need to look at it. And then, of course, with the DAP 2020 coming out, we're very familiar with the L1, lowest priced, technically acceptable, but adding the component of life cycle costs or performance-based logistics, I think, frankly, it's going to level the playing field. It's going to allow the Indian Air Force to really think not just what is the cost when I induct the aircraft, but what's the cost over 10, 15, 20 years, or even longer. And so I think when you look at it in that context, you're going to see the F-21 is a nearly perfect fit in between the existing fleet at the top end and at the lower end, and not necessarily overlap with existing capabilities that are already in the Indian Air Force. And those are tough decisions to make, because obviously inducting a new aircraft type is a major decision, so it needs to be the right fit. You mentioned on the engine side, I think it's important to recognize GE has been in India for many, many decades. They're our engine partner on the F-21. They invested $200 million over, I think, 20 years ago in the technology center that they built in Bangalore, and they've invested heavily in the engine sector. They're building engines under license for marine gas turbines with HAL. And so they have a long history, actually, of transfer of technology investment in India over 20 years, in addition to what they've done on the commercial engine side, on the supply chain. So I think we already have a very robust partner, really delivering incredible technologies on the aero engine side, which I know is very strategic to the government of India. defense. And we need to leverage that because there is a cross leverage to what's, the civil and the defense side of aircraft engines. The technology is very much the same. So if you go visit our joint venture down in Hyderabad, Tata Sikorsky Aerospace Limited, pardon me, you'll see that they're building the most advanced components for GE aircraft engines. And I know they have operations in Pune and in Bangalore that are important to recognize. So I appreciate others are aspiring to invest in India, but I think it's really important to see the foundation that exists through our partners as well.